Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How Transnuclear Americas Streamlined Records Management. My name is Danielle, and I'll be your host today. I'm the content curator for events at Laserfiche. If you have any questions that come up during the webinar, please send them through the chat feature in this platform. We'll be collecting all of the questions and answering them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Our presenter today is Gloria St. Dennis. Gloria, could you introduce yourself and tell the attendees a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Gloria St. Dennis. I am a records management consultant. I currently work for Absolute Consulting, and I have about 35 years of document records management experience. Associated mostly with records management, and I'm currently doing work on a project for TN Americas, Transnuclear Americas, to help them streamline their records management systems and processes.
Great, thank you. So the purpose behind today's webinar. This presentation is going to be providing a look at how to jumpstart a project, no matter how big or small, by developing an implementation plan that's going to help prioritize the most pressing concerns for your project. That's going to be a large part of the presentation today, how to analyze the problem that you're trying to overcome and come up with a plan of action for implementing a solution that's going to meet everyone's needs. Then we're also going to be sharing some of the solutions that Gloria worked on to help TN Americas overcome some of the problems they were facing. So she's going to be showing how she created more consistency, made it easier to find records using solutions like a metadata template, and the solution she helped to build for making sure that there's no more confusion from duplicate copies of records. So here's our agenda to give you a roadmap for where we're going. First, you're going to get a look at what the situation was like at TN Americas before this implementation took place, the types of problems the company was facing. Then Gloria's going to be showing how she analyzed the problem and built her plan to implement the solution, where they are now, the results of the changes they've made, and what their plans are for the future. Then, of course, we're going to open up the floor for some questions from the audience. So now that we're ready, let's go ahead and dive right in. Gloria, would you like to take the spotlight from here?
TN Americas is the leader in the American nuclear dry storage market, and they offer a complete line of state-of-the-art products that ensure that safe and error-free storage and transportation of used fuel and engineering services that drive innovation in the fuel cycle materials market. We are highly regulated. Many of our regulatory institutions are the NRC, DOE, and DOT, Department of Transportation. We also follow OHSAS 1801 as well as ISO 14001 standards. TN Americas, they currently generate 500 to 600 records weekly, ranging from technical files to purchase orders to contract-related documents, and we entrust those files to the electronic records management system by Laserfiche. Some of the problems that people were having were the fact that they could not find information, documents, records. The way the records were, it was making audits an absolute dreaded task. So search was not helpful because of the complexity of how their record system was set up. The document control group, which is equivalent in this company to the records management group, they were the search engine. They were the ones if they needed to find anything for audits, they always went to doc control, and doc control would give them the information. What I also found was there was a lack of standards and defined processes. Different groups were doing different things under the same roof. The records management was not sort of handled as one thing. Everybody did their own little thing. And some of the groups did it well. Some of the groups did have their act together. But there were a lot of complaints about the system that ran like wildfire, which spread to management. Yet at the time, the whole thing was a mess, but nobody wanted to change the day-to-day, you know, what they did or perform any cleanup, and there was no money and no time. So that's typical. Next slide, please. So TN America's parent company, it's called Areva Nuclear Materials. They operate actually a different records management system, and that was the one that I was using when they brought me over to this project. I was working for the parent company, and as a result, it added complexity. The fact that we had different systems, different records management, enterprise-wide records management systems, it led to complexity, and it also led to the examination of TN America's processes. What happened was IS was approached by the CEO and VP who had experience. They had experience with this other product that we were using with the parent company. So what happened was they needed a solution. They were getting a lot of complaints. So when they talked to IS, the IS person, his name is Mark, started to think that there had to be a better way to streamline records keeping and improve accuracy, efficiency, all while saving time and money. Next slide, please. So Mark recommended that a records management experienced person come in to analyze the situation, and that's how I got involved into this project. My task was to analyze what it would take to migrate TN America's electronic records management system into Areva's current enterprise-wide records management system. So I was the expert on Areva's system. So what I found in my analysis, I had discovered that TN had never used some of Laserfiche's most powerful tools because the company records were not structured in a way that these tools could access them. So in my analysis, I realized this system works great. The problem was the way it was configured. I mean, they've already put a lot of money into this. They should, you know, fix what's wrong here and not try to move bad data into another system, because what happens is the new tool with the same bad system and same bad data means the same mess. It'll just be in a different system. So next slide, please. So what was discovered in my analysis? Next. They generated, their system held 332,000 records. There were approximately 500 to 600 submitted weekly. I also realized that the records management process was not well defined and really not well understood what records management was. Naming standards were not consistent, not enforced, and there were strict records management controls. They weren't implemented. Any records management controls they had were not implemented. Next slide, please. So I found out that the tool is not the problem. What I found out was Laserfiche system was just not optimally configured. There was no process automation. There were multiple copies of documents that existed in the system, which, by the way, drove IS crazy because it exhausted available disk storage. Risk of using the incorrect version of a record happened all the time. Nobody knew which one was the correct one. And metadata wasn't standardized. I'll give you an example, and I'll show it later in the presentation, but there were 5 different fields for a document number, a record number, 5 different fields. So you'll see that later on in the presentation. So I found out the tool was not the problem. So what I managed to think about was, how am I going to convince them to keep this tool that everybody's complaining about? Next slide, please. So my first recommendation to them was to strengthen their transnuclear records management program. The departments worked in silos. We had to figure out what metadata was everybody using and capture that, and then analyze it and figure out how can we slim this down a little bit. So As a result of that, my recommendation was, prior to any system changes, you must create a records management policy and program. Put some teeth behind not following a records process. And then we had a smaller set of what we call document templates. And that is literally just a collection of metadata is a template. Excuse me. Next screen, please. So with that, I was able to solidify a records retention plan. They had one, but they had one per department. I pretty much set one up for the whole company as a whole. We also defined what constitutes a record. They really didn't have clear guidance on that. Defined some clear procedures and workflows to process and approve records so that everybody knew where the record had to go. And they understood what a record was. I also realized they were using this system as a dumping ground for drafts and for things that were not signed off on. So a record is a complete record, signatures and all. So that had to be defined and trained. People had to train on that. Next slide, please. So once they had a good foundation, a good records management program, then we had to look at the system. And I realized in my analysis that it was very well suited for document and records management. What needed to happen is they did need to do some data cleanup with the data that was there. They needed to do some system reconfiguration. They were not going to work the way they were currently working. And we had to provide training to the administrators and the records or doc control personnel in order for them to understand the value. Because even those that process the records didn't understand the value of a record the way they should. Next screen, please. So we prepared some training material, and we also conducted training for employees, and then I also recommended that they perform yearly quality checks to see if things have improved. Next, please. So I provided them with 3 options. You could do nothing and continue using Laserfiche as it was configured and continue to get lots of complaints. You could reconfigure and improve the use of Laserfiche, or you could migrate to the new tool. And when we came up with those recommendations, we came up with costs, and it was going to be very costly to migrate their current data into the current enterprise-wide Ariba system. So it was definitely, next screen please, it was definitely the cheaper way to go to just reconfigure and approve the use of Laserfiche, which they approved, and that was wonderful. Next screen, please. So once I got the buy-in from management of my recommendation, because that was not their original intent, I had to set up a plan of action and decide how am I going to implement this. Next screen, please. So we started with a statement of work. With that statement of work, which contained, as you can see on the screen here, project scope, activities, deliverables, schedule, resource assumptions, costs, and acceptance. Acceptance meaning they signed on the dotted line and agreed to these schedules. This was reviewed and accepted by the process owner, which in this case was TN Americas, the VP, and I met with Doc Control Supervisor to make sure she bought into this as well. The next bullet, I then reviewed the statement of work with document control so they understood what I was coming in to do. At the same time, I conducted a records management self-assessment survey that I got off the internet, nothing spectacular, and it was very helpful to, if nothing else, it allowed for open discussions about their current state of affairs. And that worked really well to start conversations, and that's always the goal. And again, I don't think they understood the value of a record as much as they should, so that helped with that as well. And I met with stakeholders. I actually asked the VP to announce the fact that TN had recently made a significant investment in upgrading their system, and that in addition, we were going to add new functionality. We were going to add workflow and be able to route documents around. So once he announced that, I also asked him to announce the fact that this is and again, I did that because I needed it to come from the top, this is a new records management improvement project that just began, The success of this project requires stakeholders from various groups to participate in the business process mapping meetings or response surveys. So I just needed a group of people from all different parts of the company to bounce ideas off of. They weren't necessarily making decisions, but they were going to tell me, you know, Gloria, you're really way off on that. That's really not going to work here at this company. You don't understand the culture. So with the meetings with the stakeholders, that worked out really well. Once the VP gave me a list of names, he provided one representative from each group. I was able to start meeting with them. Next slide, please. So again, with them, I had to provide them with their role and their expectations. I expect you to attend meetings, and it'll be an hour per week in order to discuss issues that I need to have resolved by the team. The other thing I had to do when I first met with them was explain to them what records management was, a life cycle of a record, and the fact, when does it go into the system, and when is it, you know, when is it just a doc control document versus a records and information management document where you have to, you know, archive it and make sure you capture the correct data. So at that point, the team helped me define what a record was for their company, and they had a definition, and we went over it, tweaked it, and that's what we ended up with. So next slide, please. So the other thing I did for these meetings was we had them do process mapping. Oh, well, let me go to the first bullet. So the preliminary assessment of records management programs. So I also found on the internet sort of a questionnaire to identify major problems and then to set the priorities for that. And that was called Where's Your Pain? So that was an interesting concept. And what I did with that survey is I sent it to the stakeholders initially before I even met with them. Then we discussed it at meetings, and then at the end of everything, when we went live with the product, I sent it out again to see what the differences would be. So also with the meetings, we mapped out document and records management processes. And we started with some simple things. So I used them quite a bit for brainstorming. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, these slides will go quickly. We did review the survey results, Where's Your Pain? Again, it's something I took off the internet. I did tweak some of the wording to make it more specific for TN. What it did was focus on addressing primary pain points and to provide them the most satisfaction and productivity with their electronic, with their ECM system, and hopefully they'll get, you know, a bigger return on their investment. So there are some key issues that we discussed. Next slide, please. So these were the initial results. Workflow, versioning, searching, organization, access, retention, sharing, and security. So the questions were associated with that. And if we go to the next slide, and that was just a good way of addressing people who are visual. So for workflow, current workflow processes are leaky and inefficient, allowing important work to fall through the cracks or making tracking timely progression difficult. So people couldn't find where things were. They were on people's desks. They weren't anywhere where you could look it up and say, oh, Jack has that. So that was a huge issue. That was what I felt from the results, survey results, was the biggest problem to start working on. So fortunately, we had purchased some software that would allow us to now add workflow to the mix. Next screen, please. Versioning, multiple, and I'm sure as you're listening to me, you are shaking your head or, you know, saying yes, like versioning, storing multiple copies of documents, so when later they're confused as to what's the right version. I mean, I'm still cleaning up data in the system today where it was, you know, revision 5 of a document, but it still shows as revision 00. It just was very, very difficult. Next screen, please. Searching. Users can't find documents they're looking for. at all, or it takes a significant amount of time to find it, or they have to walk to doc control or call doc control to get them to find it for them. So that was a lot of the issues that had come up. Next screen, please. Organization. The existing storage is unorganized. It doesn't make sense to them. Now, again, these were sort of organized for these people in silos by departments, and some departments did a great job of it, such as QA, quality assurance, but not everybody did as well organizing their documents, so it could be difficult to find. Next screen, please. Access. Users don't have online access to needed documents outside the office or production floor. So, you know, as we go through each of these now, the priority seems to be less and less. So this didn't seem to be as much of an issue for the results of the survey. Next screen, please. And retention. The company is buried in old documents but can't delete files because they don't know the good from the bad. Again, I think we're starting to clean that stuff up a little bit as well. Next screen, please. And sharing. Actually, Laserfiche, I will say, does a good job of that, which I think is why it's so lower here. It's pretty easy to share files and send them out and email them to customers and things. So next screen, please. And security. Existing systems don't handle security adequately. I think at the time this was a small issue, but right now we're really building a lot more security than we had before, especially with HIPAA and more of the personal information like social security numbers, things like that. So they're doing a better job of dealing with the security issues on their documentation. Next screen, please. So another part of my plan of action once I was done with the survey was to create a formal schedule. So as you can see here, we were lucky enough that we could create a test system. They did agree to create a test system, which they never had. Everything they did in production, which is why system changes never happened, because there was no place to play before we rolled to production. So currently today, it works out really well. We do have a test system and we have a production system. So a lot of what we did, especially in the schedule, was, you know, let's draft some requirements, let's deliver the test environment, let's create the metadata, templates, et cetera. So, and we had to assign times, start times and end times that we thought would be appropriate. And I would make sure for the person whose name was in the right column that they agreed to that time to make this a schedule that could work for everybody. So, and we also created predecessors, and we're able to, so we had start dates, finish dates, predecessors, and resources. So in other words, one thing couldn't start until another one got finished. So that worked out really well. And we had agreement by everybody, all the resources. Next screen, please. Okay. So again, as I already mentioned, we had to create their records management policy. So this is where we started with with documentation. I created a records management policy and what we call a program description manual. What they did not have in one place was something that described the records management program. What systems do you have? What metadata do you use? What you know, how many times is your data archived? So we really had to have one place where we could describe what does TN do for records management. So that was helpful. Next screen, please. Oop. Well, the next screen will be design. Okay, thanks. Metadata, and this is where we actually designed the system. So what metadata are we going to keep? What templates? Again, a template is a group of metadata. What forms do we need to be designing to? What's it going to take to design all that in workflow automation? And we have to have, especially because we work for the NRC, long-term retention on all our data. So what we had to do was simplify everything. I had to look at what they had, What do they still use? I mean, I actually analyzed fields that they had never put any value into it, 0. Like probably 12 of them I deleted because they were created and never used. So all that went away. Next screen, please. We also had to consider and plan for the migration. What are we going to do with the data that's out there now? How's that going to behave? Well, what we ended up doing is migrating it to the new structure. And that was no easy task. That actually, I think, took 5 days running concurrently to do that, which means downtime during that time. Or not downtime, but what happened is they weren't sure if they were looking, you know, how to look because it was going to be 2 different ways, 2 different methods. So we did need to convert the existing documents to the new format. We did partner with Unity ECM, which is what we call the VAR in Laserfiche space. It's a value-added reseller, and anytime we have to do anything complex, we call them, and they've been extremely helpful. So they helped us develop a migration tool in order to map the old metadata to the new metadata and then move the content between volumes. So that worked really well. We had to plan for what new processes we were going to build and when, and we sort of took a phased approach for that. We also had to make sure the records management and user procedures were ready to go, and at the same time we had to build our training material. So that was all in the plan. Next slide, please. Then we had to go build it and test it. So first we had to set up the test system, load the test system with the same existing production data, and what we did was we left the content in production, and we only took the metadata in test because that way we could save space. But what that allowed us to do was run migration in test to make sure that worked and that the old stuff would move to the new way, and we did work through a lot of bugs. This was so that we would know where we are and how to get where we wanted to be, and we had to continue testing. And so we also had to learn to build forms and workflows because we had never had, nobody at TN had experience with that. So we started with the easiest form. We started with access to Laserfiche. Who needs access to Laserfiche? If you need access to Laserfiche, you're going to fill out a form, give us your name, and your supervisor is going to give you the okay for that, and then it's going to come to doc control where they will execute that request. So that was a nice, simple form to learn on. The next form we did, which was a little more complex, was to reserve a doc number. And then the last form we did before go live was submit a record to doc control. Very simple. We weren't expecting anybody to get signatures anywhere. It was literally going to be, you know, upload a PDF that's been signed off that you scanned, upload that, give me your metadata, click submit, and it goes to doc control, and then anybody in the doc control group can grab it, review it, and approve it, and it goes into the system. So we did have to train doc control. We also had to train the user community. Next screen, please. And the next step was to roll out and evaluate. So we went live, and we then issued the procedures at the same time. And we also tried to guide the help desk on maybe some of the issues they might come up with. And so at that point, once you go live, you're no longer like calling IS and saying, oh, we have an issue. You could do that when you're testing, but when you went live, the deal was any issues you have, send them to the help desk so we can track and trend what the issues are. That also lets you decide, do you need to do more training? So next screen, please. So you put this all together, and again, I spoke about documentation, design, plan, build and test, roll out and evaluate. As you go along throughout all of these processes for the plan of action, you must be doing data cleanup, especially if you're working with an old system and migrating. And we're still finding old data where they named a record, training record. Didn't put the name, didn't put who it was, didn't give a date, so we're still, today, still cleaning up data. And during that whole process, you want to communicate, because the more people know, the less scared they will be of it. Next screen, please. So the other thing I did, I had regular meetings. I developed a schedule with start dates, finish dates. I already talked about that. Had agreement by the resources. I did maintain an issues log throughout. I think I have a slide that we'll look at it in a minute, where it helped me prioritize items. We did discuss the schedule and open issues log daily with the owner of the process and IS. So every day, I mean, this was a huge project, a huge undertaking we were doing. So we met daily while we were in the process. We did invite our VAR, which is, again, Unity, a company called Unity, when required. So we probably met with them once a week. We did conduct a weekly project status update with the executive sponsor, the vice president. He was also the one under pressure to get this done. So he was hounding us for, you know, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? So what's the holdup? And if there was a holdup that he could help us with, he did. I also met with periodically with the stakeholders. I would send them the survey, discuss the results, help them prioritize the design of the system. Sometimes I would demo it to them. That was very helpful, too, to get them options for solutions. And what it did, it allowed them to give me feedback, and it allowed them to do testing. So that was helpful as well. Next screen, please. So I mentioned the issues log. It was just an Excel spreadsheet, nothing fancy. I had a tab for open issues. I had a tab for closed issues. Once we closed them, I moved them so that they would stay out of my way and not bog me down in the open issues log. And then if I had any images, screenshots that I took, I would put them in the images tab and then, you know, let people know who's looking at the log. There's an image, go see it. And it would be associated with that item number. This was a huge help for sorting and setting priorities and reprioritizing. And, you know, we would look at things and say, does this really need to be a high priority, yes or no? And this is what we talk to on a daily basis, which was very helpful. Next screen, please. So where are we now? Next. So we do have one basic records management template. We have 29 metadata fields. We have migrated all of the records to the more simplified data model. We have a single source for drop-downs, and that's huge. We have upgraded the software, we added automation, and we simplified searches. So we also standardized the file names of the records. No matter what the user names the document, the automated process is going to rename it to what we call the doc ID or doc type, plus the doc number, plus the revision. So it's consistent and standardized. Next screen, please. So this is an example of what they had before. I can't remember if what this slide is. Let's see. I have to go look at mine. No. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we did get fancy. All right, so we went from, I think it says 29 down the bottom left, to one template. So there were 29 different templates. When people went to do a search, they did not know what to do. Now they go and they say, I'm looking for a record. They're going to look at the submit to doc control template. And again, a template is just a group of metadata that you've assigned. Next screen, please. And we went, as far as metadata, from 100 and some odd, 129, I think, or 128, to 29 fields. That's it. Again, extremely helpful for finding a record. Next screen, please. An example of bad data was, if you see to the left the source name, it says date, document date, executed date, IT forms date, ITPO date, vendor quote date. Those were the different dates used on various templates. We have one template now, and it's called document date. So when I did my migration, I took all of those date fields and I migrated it into the one document date field. And you can see I had to do that with certificate number, originator, charge number, revision, vendor, and probably a few others, but those were the biggies. Next screen, please. So we started with 3 processes. You can hit, I think, I think I circled those processes. There you go. So we did start with 3 processes. Again, the Laserfiche access request form, reserve a document number, and submit a record to Doc Control. And by the way, the Laserfiche access request form is available to the TN public, so you don't already have to be a user to access that form. You can actually get to that form, fill it out yourself, submit it, and then you'll get access to Laserfiche. The other 2, however, you do have to be Laserfiche users in order to get to those other 2 forms. At the same time, we have added 2 more processes, and design change request process is currently the one that I'm working on and will be released in August. That one is huge. So hit next. I'm not sure if I did anything fancy on some of these. Nope, we're good. Okay, stay right there. Thanks. So what you see here are some of the things that I learned as I went along. For the Laserfiche access request form, I can populate it with the current date. I did an auto-populate with whoever's logged in. That's who the name will be. You do have the ability to change that. We also standardized the drop-down list. So the supervisor manager list is a drop-down. They have to choose from that only. And then we do have some dynamic fields. For example, access request. If you pick read-only, then you will get the description of read-only. If you pick I need forms access, you will get the description of that. So we also learned how to do dynamic things. Next screen, please. So this is the workflow that I use. Again, learned some things from here too. So the user fills out a request that they want to access. It goes to the supervisor, and that little timer thing you see up above, that gold, that gives the supervisor, I forget, I think 2 or 3 days to approve it before they'll get another email that says you need to do this, another email that says you need to do this. So the whole timer thing is really, notification thing is cool. If they reject it, it stays to Laserfiche as a rejection, so that we have the forms that show that the supervisor rejected it, and then it issues an email to everybody that says, sorry, not allowed access. If they approve it, it goes to the Doc Control folks. It saves to Laserfiche if they reject it, and again, another email issued to the supervisor and the person who filled out the form if Doc Control rejects it. And then last but not least, if they approve it, it saves as approved, and it issues an email to everybody, and that's the end of the workflow. So that was a nice simple one to start out with to learn how forms works. Next. The other thing we learned was to single source for drop-down. So we have what we call external tables that we keep up to date, and once you update the data in that one table, it updates everything, no matter whether you're looking at the drop-down from forms, from workflow, or from Laserfiche. It's super convenient, and it does an immediate update to everything. The other thing we learned to do with these external tables is document numbering. So when we did this, we had 2 types of document numbers. We have now more. But if the document ID that was provided had was a 1, then it would provide the next number. For 1139, it would go to 1140. And then there's another doc type for letters we call the E-letter number, and it's E- is the prefix, and it will give a next generated number. So we got all that working very smoothly, and we've added, again, multiple numbers. So the whole external tables was extremely useful for keeping things standardized, consistent throughout all the applications. Next, please. So another form that I didn't talk about yet is the IS request form. This is the way we maintain, and it's Doc Control only that fills these out, but this is the way we maintain the drop-downs. This is where Doc Control talks to IS and says, I need you to add or remove from an external table. And because they don't see the external tables the way the system admins do, they need to provide information. So depending on which if they pick category, they only have to fill out one field. If they pick out software code, they actually have to fill out 3 different pieces of metadata. So This works out really well, and what it does is it automatically generates an email to the help desk. And so the help desk ticket goes straight in, the IS team works on it and closes the ticket. Next screen, please. So this is reserve a doc number. This was another one of the early workflows that we created, and I just mentioned to you about that external table and how, you know, depending on the document type that you're working on will depend on whether it gets a number and what the format of that number looks like. So next screen, please. Reserve a doc number. This is the workflow that goes behind that. So the user fills out a form. Some of our doc types, the numbers are not generated by the system. Some doc types, they're still generated by an Access database somewhere on an engineer's desktop or something. So we did, by doc type, we were able to say, you know, you don't pull a number through this system. You have to do it a different way, and that's when they'll get an email that says that. But if you go across and they get issued the email, you can see here that it will do two different things. Depending on the doc number, it will issue a doc number email, and then the correspondence one is a little different because correspondence, they want more information. So the email that they get has a little bit more information than the email they get just generating a regular number. Next screen, please. Submit a record was the third one. This one was a little more complex. We had a lot to do here, but we were able to say, is this a HIPAA safeguarded document? We need the users to tell us that. And if they say yes, then automatically they fill out this form, and as soon as it goes in the system, it's protected. So there's no questions asked, and doc control is not trying to make a judgment call here. The user has made that call. However, when it does come to doc control, they do have the ability to check yes as well. If they review the record and they find that it's a HIPAA document and it needs to be safeguarded, they will check yes, and it will go in that way into the system. So next. This is the workflow behind that. So they fill out the document. This goes straight to doc control. If doc control rejects it, it goes back to DCA, and it can go around in circles until it finally, the record is correct. Once the record is correct, we save it to Laserfiche. We set a tag, it's what we call set a tag, and that's the HIPAA tag, but it's also available to set other things if you have something that's going to set something as proprietary, or so we do have the ability to expand that beyond HIPAA for security purposes. And then it sends the email out that the record was released. Next screen, please. So where are we now? Oh, we're still here. Oh, where are we now? So the other thing we did was created, Laserfiche has a couple of different ways, front ends to access Laserfiche, the database, the system. And the one that we have chosen to provide to the users is what we call WebLink. And WebLink, what we've been able to do is customize this whole process so that we can, number one, there's the first, right smack dab in the middle, it says basic search fields. When the user clicks on that, it's a real simple, easy to use search capabilities. Or they can go in and browse if they want. Laserfiche Access Request Form is here. Anybody can use that. And then there's help resources that everybody has access to. Now, down below that, that you need to have a special license for those things down there. But those are the other workflows I talked about, reserve a doc number, submit. We also have computer program error report review sheet. And then the other two front ends, web access and Laserfiche forms. Next screen, please. So this was the screen that we created that the majority of people, they use this for searching. So it's very simple. You know, do I know my doc number? Then throw it in. Do I think there might be some words before or after? Let's use the asterisk as a wild card. So it's pretty simple, easy to use, and pretty much everybody gets what they need from this one screen. So we just call it the basic search screen. Next screen, please. So where are we going? What does our future hold? Next. What's happening right now is users are coming to us with their processes. They want more forms, they want more workflows, they want more automation. So some of the things that we're working on is the computer software error notices. That is out live right now. We have made some improvements that we're going to be rolling out shortly. Design change request, that is a huge, huge thing. It's a bear, but because we are a licensed, we do carry licenses for our products with the NRC, so this is really important that we have a handle on that. Supplier document submittals, the other thing, when supplier documents come in, there's a whole review process that needs to be followed, and notification to the vendors, notification to the clients about what the vendor is doing, et cetera. So that process they want to automate. Nonconformance reports. Anytime there's something wrong with a product, they have to fill out a nonconformance report. They want to automate that. Lessons learned process, and so much more. Next screen, please. So the computer program error notices, I'm not going to describe this, but the whole point to this slide was to show you that things get a little more complex. So next screen, please. And this is my design change request process, probably as complex as you can get. But in the middle there, you see it allows for parallel review by users. Now, just so you know, that whole computer program process as well as this design change process, they're actually signing off on records here electronically. So these are electric sign-offs, review and approvals, sign-offs, and in the end, the record or records end up in Laserfiche or in your record system. So next screen, please. Final thoughts. Key to winning, designing winning solutions. My personal opinion, of course, I have a records management background, so I'm a little biased, but define your records management processes and policies. Have a really good foundation of what you need to build on from a system standpoint. I think that's huge. Analyze what the processes you have. I'm actually getting really good at, taking a process, looking at the procedure, and defining a process, and asking a lot of questions about that process, and getting a lot of feedback. And there's always one or two people who have really their hearts in the whole process that are willing to say to you, this doesn't work this way. I think this would be a great idea. And you're like, okay, that will work with what we can do. Another thing that I find helpful is show proof of concept. Again, I did that with the stakeholders, and I think that helped quite a bit. Use resources for designing. I could not have survived with an online tool that Laserfiche has called Laserfiche Answers. It's a forum where you drop questions in and people respond, and I don't know if they're just sitting at their computers waiting to get a question that they know how to answer, and they're all excited when they answer it, but I get more detail and get more responses from there. That's extremely helpful. I also can't say enough about our VAR, Unity ECM. Whenever we need them, if I don't find the answer on Laserfiche Answers forum, I go to them and they are right on it. And then start small and work up to the more complex. That's what we found we did when we learned. Every time we did a new process, we learned something new, a new thing. Next. Listen to your users, other perspectives on user behavior. Listen to the users. They're in there doing the job. Identify the needs versus wants. Prioritize, train, train, train. Next slide, please. Approaches to standardizing common processes. Have the process owners involved. Conduct analysis of the process. And by the way, the process owners, get them involved early. Streamline the process. Question everything. Why are they doing it? Is that needed anymore? What's the benefit, and is there a regulation behind that? And what are the needs versus wants? Because you can develop it. It doesn't mean it adds value to anything. So, ask a lot of questions and see if they actually really have to have that. Next screen.
All right. I think this is me. We're about to go into the question section, but really quickly, I'd just like to let everyone know that we're having another webinar in 2 weeks on July 12th. It's called Tools for Simple and Effective Records Management. In that one, we're going to be demonstrating the tools, some of the tools that Gloria has used during her presentation today, basically what's available in Laserfiche for making records management processes more efficient, including tools that can help simplify retention, ensure compliance with regulations, tools like a centralized interface for making finding and working with records much faster and easier. So if you're looking to solve any of the types of problems that Gloria was talking about today, be sure to join us. I'm actually sending you the link right now if you'd like to sign up through the chat feature. So we would love it if you'd join us again in 2 weeks. And with that, let's go ahead and open it up to questions from the audience. So remember that you can send us questions through either the chat feature or the Q&A feature in this platform. And we actually have a couple that came in during the presentation. So Robin wanted to know, Gloria, do you utilize dynamic fields? And I think this was in relation to metadata.
Yes, yes, I do.
And follow-up from her, how user-friendly is the implementation?
I am a records management person. I am not an IS person, although I could be a little dangerous when I need to be. And I am amazed at how, number one, our IS guy is amazed at how small the footprint is and from an IS perspective, and I'm amazed at how much I can do in the system myself without needing to call IS all the time. So I found it very easy to do, and I have watched them install the systems, and I've watched them upgrade them, and it looks very easy.
Excellent. And then we had a question, how do you have 29 fields in one template? That's amazing.
Oh, because it's little? Yeah. Yeah, you know, again, it was just a matter of analyzing the current data and seeing who's using what, and they weren't using what they thought they were. You know, when the doc control person at that time went around to all the groups and said, you know, what types of documents are you using and what type of metadata do you need to capture, you know, she did it in a siloed basis and didn't consider everybody across the board in order to help standardize. So I was able to go in and do that, and I did it with metadata that was already there. You know, I exported from their system, and I played around and looked, and the current records doc control person looked at me like, we're really going to merge all those together? Okay, let's see if that'll work.
Okay, we'll give a couple more minutes to anyone who might be collecting their thoughts. I'm going to mute myself because we've got a siren going by. We are near the fire department.
So does anybody have any other questions? Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. I am excited about this product. I've been working on it now for 2 years, and I have experience with other enterprise-wide systems. So I hope that it has piqued your curiosity and that you could attend some of the other webinars as well. Danielle?
All right, looks like that wraps up our questions. If anyone thinks of any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer any questions or pass them along to Gloria, who has been very helpful, and thank you for your time today, Gloria.
Thank you.
So with that, let's go ahead and wrap things up, and I hope I'll see everyone again in 2 weeks for our next webinar. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.